So today we're going to be talking about tearing a building in half from the inside out, featuring our works on the MGM Plus series, The Institute. So before we start, I would like to show you our company reel. Please enjoy. Thank you. We are WeFX, a Toronto-based studio founded 5 years ago in 2020. Since then, we've prided ourselves on consistently producing top-tier blockbusters visual effects while still offering all the benefits of a boutique studio. You may have heard about us from our work in John Wick 4, Wednesday, from on MGM Plus, what we do in the shadows, and many other feature films and TV. My name's Ryan Ng. Today, joined with me is our core member, some of our key artists who worked on the TV series, The Institute. So from the pipeline and lighting side, we have our lighting supervisor, Vidhu. From the effects side, we have our artists who led by our very humble effects supervisor who's sitting in the audience, Vimal. This is Mykyta. And we also have Darren, who unfortunately cannot be here in person with us today, but he will be showing his work through pre-recorded videos. So the sequence we're looking into today is a destruction sequence in this TV series called The Institute, final episode. So in this season finale, we find Luke, our protagonist, and his friends trying to escape from the building that they were being locked in, and they were using their telekinetic power to tear the building apart and really destroy it. So let's have a look and see what's the magic.
Drop the gas. Drop it now. George? George, come on. We're getting out. Let's go. What? This way.
With. So pretty easy, right? Like destructions, we've seen it many times. Well, not quite. We were awarded with 75 VFX shots just in this episode. The effects team and lighting team, they had 39 days to finish the work. And that is counting weekends. So all the Saturdays and Sundays. So as you can see, this is a very tight turnaround, high shot count, and also it involves multiple layers of highly detailed effect simulations. So luckily, we didn't have to start everything from scratch. Shout out to MPC Toronto, who was the original vendor that started the building asset. When we took over the project and we took over the asset, we only had to do very minor upgrades for certain areas to facilitate our shot needs. But still, even that, to turn this into a pile of dust and concrete is no piece of cake. And it will be basically impossible within this given timeline, with a traditional pipeline where things flow linearly, department after department. So immediately we knew that we had to find a new solution. We have to change our pipeline. We were finding a pipeline that is very scalable, that allows us to scale our team flexibly. So if we need to hire more contractors to put in their work, then we can anytime. And this pipeline also needs to minimize shot dependencies, which means we need to allow artists or different departments to work on the same entity at the same time without conflicting each other. It has to maintain shot continuity. As you can see, all of the shots are basically cut back to back. So one thing happened in one shot has to be shown in the other shot as well. And obviously, it needs to have better data management for rendering, for data handoff between departments, because simulation data is quite heavy. And last but not least, it needs to be able to fast track approval process, both by me and obviously by the client. That may sound pretty familiar. So obviously that led us to turn to Solaris and USD. Funny enough, like Houdini's been our major pillar in our pipeline since day one, since the very first day as we founded the company. It's just we never really had the chance to evolve the pipeline into using USD until this project. So today, this talk is going to be quite exciting. You're going to be hearing from our artists, our FX artists, to deep dive into the technicality of how they create this beautiful destruction magic. And also you will hear from Bidu, our lighting supervisor, sharing his firsthand experience of adapting Solaris USD as a small boutique studio and get a real-world example of heavy effects work meeting Solaris pipeline. So without further ado, I would like to pass to our first speaker, Mykyta, to talk about some wall cracks. Thank you.
Oh, hello, everybody. My name is Mykyta. Thank you, Ryan, for the introduction. I'm going to talk about the destruction shots today that we worked on. And I had worked on the number of shots for this project. Mainly, they were split in different categories like wall and floor cracks, ceiling collapse shots, and the exterior dust shots. So let's begin with the wall and floor cracks. So for this shots, we can see we handpicked some of the shots that showcase the cracks in the best way. So here the main challenge was to create a very simple, flexible, fast, and reusable setup that can be applied to different shots, which can be interior shots and also exterior shots, and multiple artists would pick it up the setup and apply that for many shots. So, yeah, let's dive into the depths of creating the crack setup. So basically, first step, we generate curves that will resemble the positions and the look of the crack, and then we animate the curves. Then we also fracture the wall or the floor, and also then we create like a procedural geometry split, and then creating the AOVs. Then we are doing RBD seam, transforming the pieces, and creating secondaries like dust and smoke. Let's dive deeper into the curve generation and animation. Firstly, we scattered some points on the asset that layout provided us, either wall or a floor. Then we connect them by using adjacent pieces, and then we used fine shortest path swap for generating basically randomly lots of different types of curves by selecting start and end points. And then we animated this curve by just selecting first point and let the solver run across the whole curve. And we also added a procedural approach to that to make the animation stutter a bit and make it a little bit jittery. So the crack just goes and then it stops and then goes again. Next step would be fracturing the wall. Here we can see that we scattered lots of points around the curve that we created, and then we used Voronoi fracture to fracture the wall using these points. After that, we created like a geometry split. It means like we just used that curve that we created and offset the fractured pieces only where the curve is basically located. So we have this simple crack in the geometry. And then we also created some AOVs like activation attribute and just like a mask of the crack position, which can be used in comp to make it easier for them. Then the next step would be RBD simulation. It was pretty straightforward, but we had to come up with different controls for that. So like in the beginning, the crack was very narrow, and the client wanted to make it more active with lots of different pieces falling apart. So we had to introduce some more control by either making the pieces fall out by distance from the curve, and also we provided some keyframe animation to art direct where the pieces get activated. And here we can see the simple RBD simulation. It was very low res, but then after we used transform pieces, we transformed the high res geometry that we created as well, and that produced this kind of result. Very cool. And then let's talk about the floor cracks. So mainly the setup was the same, with the exception of the fact that the floor consists out of two pieces. It's floor tiles and concrete underneath. So we had to fracture floor tiles separately and then integrate that with the existing crack setup. So for this first shot, where we needed to showcase very slow and progressive crack, which is like starts very slow and just spreads gradually towards the sides to the walls. And here we had to create this anticipation that something is gonna happen soon. And following the next shot in the same sequence, here we see the crack is much wider, and like we can see that it's actually not that much wider, but it was like 2 meters apart, like a very, very wide crack. But because of the camera angle, we didn't really see this, and that's how we like kind of cheated it a bit to make it consistent, because client wanted like a bigger crack. So yeah, also here we had to come up with a way to efficient way to make the floor snap a bit, because client wanted the floor go down a bit, and we decided to pass it over to animation. So animation can like animate like a very simple template that we provided to them, and then the client approved it, and then we basically got exported this simple floor crack from animation, and then back into the effects, and then effects would just make it transform and integrate in their simulation. Another type of shots that I want to talk about, it was ceiling collapse. Here we can see one of the main shots for ceiling collapse. There was a handful, and it was a really cool shot. Here's another one. So basically, first step was to like the goal for that for this type of shots was to actually match, enhance like the actual special effects that we had on the plate. So you can see here some screenshots of the actual plate. We had the ceiling already fall out in the plate, so the effects task was to seamlessly match the speed and the timing of those pieces collapse. So for that, in Asset, we built a very exact model of the tiles, of the roof tiles. So the position of them match almost perfectly. And then we passed it to effects for simulation. And diving a bit deeper into the effects part of this, we got lots of different pieces like from the asset. Was like fiber tiles, metal fixtures, glass, pipes, and cables, and they all needed to be behaving realistically, meaning that we set up the glue, hard, and soft constraints correspondingly, so we can make them bend and break for the most part. So talking about the layering of the constraints, it was pretty complex. So basically, the constraint logic was that the tiles would hang from the metal frame above the tiles, and the metal frame would hang from the upper part of the ceiling. And also there are like metal like pipes and cables inside the metal frame. So basically, when like the whole collapse was activated by the concrete falling from the top and just creating this domino effect. Basically, it would activate all other pieces all together, beginning from the metal frame, and then everything would just collapse. Yeah, we can see it here in this flipbook, and also we can see on the right here we have a screenshot from the look dev. Here, Darren gonna talk about his RBD for exterior shots. I'm gonna pause here and play the video.
Hey guys, let me introduce a bit of myself. My name is Darren, and I'm an FX artist here at WeFX. So here I wanted to share how we managed to complete this in a short amount of time and the process and approach that we took to complete this destruction. So let's take a look at this destruction shot. Cool. So this is an overview of the steps for the building destruction process, from creating the low-res proxy for the guide sim, and then animating the guide sim, creating the fracture, designing the constraints, the sim itself, rebar sim, and then using the rebar sim to post-process the main sim, and then transferring back the high-res pieces, and lastly, bringing all back together for lighting. Firstly, we created this proxy geo from the model using a VDB and remeshing it to create a low-res version of it. We fractured the proxy into two sections, the top and bottom, so that we can animate the tearing of the building. We also animate the proxy here in Houdini for faster turnarounds and feedbacks. But most importantly is that we animate S1 for 3 shots to save time, so we don't have to sim the building separately for each shots. And here's the preview of the guide sim for the continuing shots. Moving on to the fractures, we tend to create a new mesh from the model again and shrink it a little bit to create a new layer for the base sim, because we wanted to create these effects of layering the concrete into two parts, such as the inner concrete and the external concrete, which is the original model that we fractured into even smaller pieces for detailing. Splitting the fracture based on the size of the geo also help us to generate the fracture faster. Since it is a big building, the bigger density geo will have more scatter points than the smaller ones. Since some of the building parts we are using Boolean fracture, which cause some tiny pieces that is not necessary, we tend to merge it into the neighboring pieces to avoid problems for the sim later on. And for the interior, since it is not too visible, we are fully using Boolean fracture, which is much faster than the RBD material fracture with details. So going to the constraint land, we create the constraint based on the top and bottom section for art direction purposes in the sim for the tearing of the building. We tried quite a lot of approach for the constraint here, and we feel like this is the best approach because we encounter some problems where we're not splitting the constraint. The building won't split perfectly into two parts, even when using the guides. So here's a preview of the constraint inside the sim where it's switching and performing. And we also create multiple groups, as we see here for the main beam section. We have group for the top, bottom, the connection between top and bottom, the connection between clusters. Yeah. So getting to the main sim, prepping the guide sim is essential here, as we split up the guide based on parts such as the main pillar has its own guide, the roof, the wall. We also created a new group for the centerpiece from the hero pillar that is falling, because they all have different timing for unguiding. Here's a preview of the guides, active and inactive. And after having the guide ready for sim, we test it out in smaller section of the building to see if the guide is working well and if the constraints are working well for quicker performance approval. Since we are defying the law of physics here, we have room to play around with the gravity. So we created a custom gravity force using the H activation based on the broken constraint, because we wanted to have the feel where the building is split into two parts and lifting. The smaller pieces got levitated and have different gravity force as the bottom part of the building. And after a certain age, it tends to convert back to the original gravity. And for the interior sim here is separated from the main building, so we have much faster workflow. As we put the main building sim to the farm, we can tweak and work on the interior. So for the rebar sim, we tend to create a proxy geo for the rebars as well, and doing a transform pieces from the building so they have similar movement. Then we use the proxy as a guide to drive the simulation of the rebars. And once the rebar sim is completed, we then filter some of the main building to have the same performance as the rebars by modifying the RBD name pieces and do transform pieces with the rebars point sim. We also tend to blend between the modified building sim with the rebar and the original building sim for art direction. For example, we only influence the hero pillar piece to be affected only 30%. Here we can see the before and after of the post process. As we see here, the before, the pieces seems to be more rigid. And after all this, cleaning up the rebars is essential because some of the rebar tends to stick out of the building, so we have to delete some of them. So as we finish the post-process of the main sim with the rebars, we bring the high-res pieces back in. As we see here, we have this growth solver for the crack to reveal on the static high-res geo. And for the roof, we added more details as well. For instance, in the previous shot, the roof has been broken down before the lifting. So by taking the Boolean geo from the previous shot, we transferred the look here while maintaining the same name for the transform pieces to work properly. And here we have the external shell sim for more details. As we have the low-res sim version of the building, we get the edge activation using a debris source and do a transfer to this layer. But we only want to affect some of the pieces, so we did a filter based on the size for this one here. Lastly, bringing all back together. As we have everything ready for lighting, we are separating the export into parts, such as the roof has its own, the interior, the rebar, the building itself, because merging them into one export will not be as efficient as it is. For instance, when there is a problem in one component, we can easily switch them. And since we are not simulating the whole component of the building, and we are doing it in Solaris, which my FX layer will have stronger opinion over the asset, we have to prune some of the pieces that are not sim to keep things clean and smooth during the passover. And while waiting for the USD cache, I'm also preparing the BGO files of the high-res and low-res of the building and some additional layer that is required for the dust sim that Mykyta will now take over. And that's it for my presentation. I hope you guys enjoy it, and thank you.
Okay, thanks to Darren, who didn't come today, but he still managed to record such a nice breakdown of the RBD. So after we managed to create this RBD destruction, next thing would be adding secondaries like dust, small particulates, and smoke to these building shots. So talk specifically about the goals. It would we had to basically use our artistic vision to create this epic dust behavior, because firstly we didn't have that much of a reference for the look of the dust, and the cameras were almost static, so we had to exaggerate the performance of the dust. And we use lots of YouTube building destruction references for that. And that's how we created this cinematic look for the dust. Talking about more in depth, so basically after Darren made his RBD simulation, we received 4 different RBD simulations to create the emissions for the dust and smoke. So there were high-res and low-res exterior simulations. I mean, it means exterior walls and the shell of the building. And then we also had high-res and low-res interior simulations. And we split it up because the high-res version of both simulations combined was just a bit over 25 million points, and there were mostly 100,000 pieces. So just to be efficient in our workflow, we had to use the low-res versions mostly. But the only moment where we use the high-res version of the simulation is for close-up collisions for the dust and smoke. Here, just to talk about emission of the elements, there were more than 30 elements, both of particulates and smoke elements. And we across all of these elements, we just used one trick basically to make the emission, is to freeze the whole RBD performance, then scatter some points on top of that, and then we use that tribute interpolate sub to basically make them stick to the moving geometry. And this was very efficient and very simple. That allowed us to change the densities of the point counts, and basically we also optimize it in this way. So to make it even more efficient, we didn't use any warp noises. We just stick to the attribute noises, which provide us the most freedom that we wished for. We just layer them on top of each other, and the only adjustment that we created is we dove into asset, and we instead of using the original position, we used the rest position. That way, we made sure that the noise gonna stay on the moving geometry all the time. So across all of these 30 something simulations, we had one that was covering almost all of the screen space, and we had to optimize it. So we decided to split that apart, and splitting this whole simulation into 4 different batches allowed us to simulate it faster, because we would just have one node simulating one batch. So in four different machines would be working on the same simulation, and it allowed us to create everything faster. And then also we provided these different smoke simulations to lighting, that lighting would render them separately, and COM then can modify them and create some variations on their end. And the variations would be basically density variations and color variations. Color variations needed to make it more realistic, like the smoke is coming from the concrete or the bricks or the sand, etc. Another tricky problem that we had to deal with was the camera angle, specifically for the shot where we can see the building start splitting apart. We had to showcase that the building splits not entirely from the whole base, but it was a gradual split. And we already had RBD showing that, but because of the camera angle, the rotation of the top half of the building was not visible from that shot. So we had to come up with another way of hitting this creative node from the client, and we decided to basically emit the smoke from the center of the building first, and then gradually the emission would spread to the sides of the building. And that way we create this illusion that the building is actually coming apart from the first column, from the column that is closest to the camera. And to do that, we just imported a curve that Darren provided us with. And this curve was basically driving the emission propagation. And then we're driving the actual emission from that attribute as well. Basically, after creating all those elements, we had to export that. And luckily, we had a very nice workflow around that in Solaris. Basically, we combined all of the VDBs in one USD, and then imported that USD with other layers like particulates and geometry. And then we basically combine all of that in the proprietary asset, HDA, that our pipeline team had created. And then we just exported that to the folder that was created automatically once we had the publish button. So it allowed us for seamless export across multiple artists, and it basically protected us from overriding others' work. So it was very cool. And now to talk deeply about our Solaris workflow, I'm gonna pass it to Vidu, our lightning supervisor. And that's it for me. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mykyta. So first, I'll walk you through the simplified diagram of our legacy pipeline. Starting on the left, we used Alembics for models and custom HDAs for look dev materials. Coming from the assets department. Layouts would generally be Alembics or Houdini node groups for more complex and custom setups. The FX surface data would generally be exported as Alembics or BGOSCs in a Singe, while any volumetric data would be exported as VDBs. Any complex setups would still use custom node groups or HIP files directly. At the lighting step, this would involve manual scene assembly and make it quite challenging to manage updates and maintain HIP files. We use Arnold as our primary render engine. So in order to have performant rendering, we would run a .ass file generation step for complicated and massive layout scenes. We would also generate .ass files for frame batches prior to rendering them on the farm. As mentioned by Ryan, we knew that Solaris would be a great fit for this show, but we had a few adoption challenges. Solaris is a completely different paradigm where we use LOP nodes to author USD primitives on the scene graph stage and then save them as scene layers on disk. This is very different from the traditional Houdini workflow and was initially a challenge for artists to wrap their heads around. Additionally, USD has a steep learning curve with tons of jargon and specific concepts that are crucial to understand. Getting artists comfortable with Solaris and USD concepts was one of the first goals that we identified, and we immediately started on-the-job training across assets, layout, FX, and lighting departments. Secondly, we also had to adapt all our existing traditional Houdini pipeline workflows to now work with Solaris. Some of the most common artist workflows included rendering objects as forced mattes, forced phantoms, plate projections, atmospheric fog box, pour light AOVs, including for mesh lights, material assignments, to name a few. Additionally, due to the tight timeline and rapid iterations, we had to troubleshoot on the fly. There was a lot of brainstorming between departments to identify best practices and come up with unique solutions to some of the problems, especially since we weren't working on the latest builds of Houdini and Arnold, where some of these bugs had already been identified and fixed. It was necessary to prototype and deploy several custom HDAs, which formed the backbone of our Solaris pipeline for publishing, importing, rendering, and deadline farm submissions. Also, some of our shots had over 20 different render layers, so our custom HDAs had to be designed to give the artist complete control, yet stay within the USD paradigm. We realized early on that maintaining the sanctity of the shot manifest was crucial, since every department would be relying on it, and we didn't have time to implement QCs. We also took this opportunity to make use of Python in Solaris and add in several newer features, such as auto-generation of Perlite AOVs and asset matte AOVs. Finally, we also wanted to maintain the downstream department workflows of the compositing department. So we had to ensure that our Solaris outputs were standardized and in line with the legacy pipeline output. Thus, our Solaris USD pipeline version 1.0 was born. Our assets are now well-structured USD components, and we have a custom HDA to streamline USD department publishes. The layout department now publishes USD layers directly into the shot manifest along with any cameras. As Mykyta mentioned, FX also directly publishes into the shot manifest. Our publishing HDA creates and tracks separate layers for different artists, publishing within the FX layer of the shot manifest. This tremendously streamlines the scene building and scene updating aspects of the lighting step of the pipeline. We also now use Husk as our command line utility to dispatch shot USD files directly for rendering. This workflow basically bypasses the need to generate any .ass files prior to rendering. Here's our typical shot layer structure for the show. On the left, we have our shot layer stack, with the layout layer having the weakest opinion to the lighting layer having the strongest opinion. In the center and the right columns, I've shown an expanded USD layer view of the shot USD to give a more in-depth picture of a typical shot. And here is our typical USD scene graph structure from one of the lighting shots used for the show. All right, so what worked well for us? The Solaris pipeline, first of all, allowed multiple artists to work on several shots at the same time, and also allowed us to work and update several different parts of the same shot. Having a small team of 4 FX artists and 3 lighting artists, together with the new Solaris workflow, enabled us to communicate more effectively and benefit from greater task clarity. The new Solaris pipeline allowed us to swiftly iterate over shots. By reducing the turnaround time per iteration, we were also able to deliver more versions, up to 30 to 35 versions for some of the shots. Additionally, we were able to achieve better consistency with our faster iterated exports as compared to our legacy pipeline, since in USD, only specific prims would need to be updated as opposed to altering the entire asset. This new pipeline made it relatively straightforward to manage and update complex scenes and also override materials. Lastly, since we were not having any .ass file generations prior to rendering, we generated massive efficiencies in render time and disk space. In terms of our learning, we were working without an asset resolver. And based on our pipeline constraints, we set up some best practices early on. We set up strict naming conventions for the exported USDs, all controlled by the publisher HDA. We decided that prim names would not contain versions, but instead the versions would be tracked under the scene layers on disk. We would also always ensure that default root prim always exists for all USD exports, which would make it easier to reference particular prim trees and reposition prims on stage if required. We trusted and used several of the Solaris tools that ship with Houdini. To list a few, the snapshot strip was heavily used in production by our lighting artists, since we had viewport crashes early on due to rapid prototyping of some of our HDAs and tools. The snapshot strip also helped with comparing AOVs, comparing renders, and restoring the scene node graph to an earlier different snapshot in time. The component builder was a no-brainer for us to get cleaner and more efficient USD assets. Also, since most of the artists were used to working with bundles in the traditional Houdini OBJ context, we extensively used collections as their counterparts in Solaris. Although this isn't a tool per se, the Houdini USD prim patterns proved invaluable to our artists for surgically selecting primitives on the stage to perform specific operations. And lastly, having all department handoffs unified as USDs helped streamline the pipeline tooling around it. We relied heavily on USD compositions and primitive opinions to give us a non-destructive layer stack on overrides. Here you can see the asset building available to lighting simultaneously as other departments are still working on it. Once FX publishes their layers, the manifest gets auto-updated with the new destroyed building. Additionally, as more data are published by FX, the updates flow seamlessly and are ready for lighting and rendering. That's our journey for how we tore a building in half from inside out. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Thank you.
We would like to open up the floor for questions. Yep. Mike's coming.
Mykyta.
In sourcing for the smoke, I saw an MS attribute.
Yeah.
The attribute, adjust floater attribute noise. I'm wondering what that was for. Oh, the attribute noise? There was an attribute called MS. It was like density, density, MS, density, density. I'm wondering what the MS. MS, it was like a mask that we basically said that we are adjusting the density of the next attribute density by that mask. So it was like also a noise, but it was in another attribute. So basically we would like multiply that attribute on top of the next attribute, next noise for the emission. Yeah. So it was like make to control the density basically. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Do you have one more question? I'm not sure if I was understanding on the cracks. Were you using the AOVs to reveal the cracks in comp? Or is that how it was done? Or one of the reasons, yes. One of the reasons why we used AOVs in comp because we needed to basically blend the CG with the plate. So the AOVs helped comp to basically say where is actually CGI and where is the real plate, and we can blend them between nicely. Yeah. Sweet. Thank you.
And we also had a plate projection set up on the materials itself. So the renders were matching the plate, but comp still had the ability to select certain regions and mask it if need.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice work, guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I think the thing that I was confused about is the smoke simulation you guys had. You were talking about using like 4 different meshes to generate that smoke sim. What was the thought behind that? I guess when I would approach something like that, it'd be like certain areas would come from certain places, but it looked like this was all blended together.
It was part of the strategy to work around this tight time frame because we don't want everything to be baked in so early in the pipeline stage. So if we baked in multiple colors, for example, and effects, then that means anything changes, we have to go all the way back to effects. So we were trying to like separate the workload downstream so that we can have maximum flexibility. So not necessarily to source things from different material. They're part of the reason is, but it's also mostly to give us flexibility in comp to do whatever we want. So yeah, hence the separation.
Awesome work. Seriously. Nice job.
Thank you.
Great work. Did you guys experiment with the RBD procedural stuff in Solaris for this? Procedural nodes?
RBD, not sure.
No, we did not. The RBD procedural LOP node, we didn't have time to set that up. No.
Yeah, I think we weren't on that build, right?
Yeah.
We were using due to some like IT technicality things that we weren't able to use the latest build, but we were able to work around a lot of the bugs that was already solved by SciFX, obviously. But yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Hi guys, quick question about the different layer of smoke. You were saying like you were doing like rendering them in separate passes. Were you guys using like a matte comp? You were rendering deep and then comp will take over?
So typically we would work in DPXRs, but again, the tight timeline for this show specifically, we chose not to go down that route. So we would just force matte them. We had our Perlite AOV setups. So comp had complete control over turning on, turning off certain lights and changing the look of the smoke drastically, as well as we rendered all of the different smoke elements as different layers as well. So if, let's say, for example, comp did not want, let's say, the fine smoke and stuff like that, they could adjust or remove it completely.
But ideally, deep would be a very nice option for flexibility. Although the comp department's gonna probably, get pretty mad at it. But yes.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.